so maybe I just need to get out there and try it.
I have two little kids, so it's
Oh
mainly
yeah.
for them.
Yeah.
But I just like looking at it. I couldn't deal without being being in it.
Yeah.
Greetings.
Hello.
Hey, Heike.
Hi.
Yeah. Come. How we looking, Chuck? Do you hear us?
We've certainly been giving him a sound check. Okay, let's see. So,
Okay, so we just been notified by IT that we are live and ready to go. So Madam Chair, all yours.
Okay, and I think we're still waiting for Susan.
yeah. I
So
think
we'll wait.
Yeah, should be right over on our screen momentarily.
there she is, coming in.
Awesome. And there we go. Well, welcome everyone to our next Washington County Salary Commission meeting. Let's start out by reviewing the agenda and then we'll jump into the first item. So today we have time from 3 to 5, 6 agenda items. The first one will discuss the bylaws and approve them possibly. Second item, a comparative salary discussion. Third item is discussing possible other comparators. Fourth item is discussing possible invited testimony. Fifth item is other items or questions. And I guess the sixth item is adjourning. So we have five items today. So let's go ahead and get started with the first agenda item, a discussion of the bylaws and approval.
If I might make a statement here, Suzanne did a very close read of the bylaws for us and caught a couple errors. One is, and I don't know if it was done on an iPhone or whatever, but autocorrect changed alternate to alternative member. And so Brad's working on correcting that. And then there's a couple other questions. One is these bylaws, of course, we borrowed the foundation from another of one of the boards and commissions that happen to have 9 members. So it made sense to do a 3/5 vote on the bylaws because it's bigger than a simple majority. And 3/5 of 5 is 3.333. So the question is probably which for the bylaws at least, and maybe other things, 4/5. So 4 out of 5. I mean, you don't really want simple majorities, and I expect on most things we're going to get to everybody agreeing. So, but can't presume that. But so it's up to you folks. What do you think? 4 out of 5.
I would just say that if you don't, a quorum is 3, and if for some reason people can't be there, I think you want to think about those times when, if there are only 4 people and it's a 3-to-1, or if there's 5 people, 4/5, as Steve said. But the language right now says 2/3 of the voters, and so 2/3 of the members have to pass things. And so if you keep it to that, that really means that 4 out of 5 have to approve. And so do you want it to be a supermajority? Because 60% would actually be 3 out of 5, 20, 20, 20, 20, 20. So that's where just trying to figure out what the commission feels is the appropriate majority for this commission. So that was my comment there when I had a conversation with Steve.
I like the 3/5 approach. I think it gives us a little flexibility with the quorum, and it allows us to move forward if we can't get agreement amongst 4 people on the commission. So that's the one I'm leaning towards, the 3/5 option.
Do you want it then to be a simple majority? Because if there's only 4 people in attendance, if you present it as all members must be present in order to have a vote, then that exceeds the quorum requirement. So that's the only thought there.
Oh, okay.
So it could be a 2-to-1 vote. It could be a 3-to-1 vote. It could be a 3-2 vote. You know, just think of if only 3 people are there, because a quorum is 3. So that's my only comment there. I mean, I've worked on commissions before where you really need to be mindful of what is that majority vote.
And I guess also I would keep in mind how many things are you expecting to vote on? I mean, in my mind, bylaws is one, and the other one is the final report. So I don't, unlike many of the other kinds of commissions that are advisory, there's a whole lot of things that you might be advising on. I think you might, at some point, if you might decide to vote on the approach, if there's, 2 people want to do comparators, 2 people want to do some other way, some internal comparisons, something like that, that might be a vote. But I don't see a whole lot of votes. So think about it also from that perspective. It's not like we're going to vote on the minutes or the agenda, I don't think. So
We may not be voting on a whole bunch of things, but the votes that we're taking may be on important topics.
Right. So think about it that way.
I'll just make one more comment. When you use Robert's rules, you do vote on a lot of things. So I think that maybe that's an opportunity to say, perhaps you're not going to approve the minutes, perhaps you're not going. So, and I think any attorney will tell you the language, make sure the language is flexible enough to allow you to do something for unforeseen consequences or circumstances, I should say.
Hi, guys.
Yeah,
Susan, Laura. Oh, go ahead.
So this is Brad. The reason that we have a distinction for the bylaws revisions is everything else is a simple majority unless you guys want to do otherwise. It has to be at least a majority, but you could go higher than that. Is changing bylaws is usually considered a substantial vote, something that's really important. And so that's traditionally why we have a higher threshold for what gets, how many votes you need to have an approval of the bylaw revisions.
What do others think?
I think you're
Other
on mute,
discussion
Brad.
to add?
Your lips are still moving, so I don't know if you're trying to talk or not.
I think maybe he's frozen.
Am I frozen for you guys?
You went off. You went on to mute for a second.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't have anything more to add.
Okay. Do others have anything to contribute to the discussion?
One question, Brad, how, so I've used Mason's rules in the legislature, so they're a little more flexible, but how close do most of your committees adhere to Robert's Rules of Order, or is there some lower standard that we could do? I know in big groups, Roberts makes some sense, but in others not. So that was a question.
Yeah, so this is Brad again. We as a county have always used Robert's Rules of Order for all of our boards and commissions. So that's kind of the standard we use.
But do they adhere to them tightly? That's what I'm asking.
No.
Okay.
In the meetings I'm involved with, which isn't, you know, obviously there's lots of groups that meet, but yeah, they're loosely adhered to. Let's just say that.
So it seems like this, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Would it be appropriate to make a motion, or is there more discussion about from the group, like Laura or Susan or Heike? Do you have any thoughts? Because what's in question is really the 2/3 majority vote for the bylaws change. Is that what you're referencing, Suzanne? Oh, you're on mute.
I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that means 4/5 with a group that's 5. It was more just a question.
Okay.
To approve the bylaws, right? We're just.
No, Madam Chair, it would just be the vote to revise the bylaws. You would just need a simple majority to approve the bylaws.
Oh, okay. Okay. So do we have a proposed motion to modify this language, or are we happy with the language as it's currently stated?
I would move that we continue with the 3 votes for a quorum and use a majority vote for any bylaw modification.
And do we have a second for that?
Second.
And all in favor, raise your hand. And so it doesn't look like there's any opposed since we all voted in favor. So we'll keep that language as is. So let's keep working the way through. Were there other, Steve, you were kind of walking through some edits that were found. Were there others?
I think that was the key one, was the alternative instead of alternate. Suzanne, did you have anything else that you noticed?
That's it.
Yeah, okay. And that's a simple one. Go ahead.
I just have one point of clarification. So if there are bylaw changes and our quorum size is 3, with the majority vote, 2 out of 3 could satisfy that, right? Is that correct? Understand? Okay, great. That's what I was proposing. So perfect. Thanks.
So the only other question that I got from Steve was related to whether the alternate position can be considered for the making of a quorum or not. And that's a question for you all, if that's the way you want to go or not. You know, that the theory with the alternate position is that there may be scenarios where you just don't have enough people. The problem with that is when it comes to actual, you may have a quorum, but then that alternate cannot vote on actions that are before your board. But there are some real advantages to getting a quorum in that you can conduct business. You may not have a vote at all that day. You may be just hearing from others, other things on your agenda. The only downfall is when you actually take a vote, that person cannot vote. But there's some real advantages with having the alternate count towards a quorum.
And Brad, I think that's the section under Article 4D where it says only voting members can qualify as part of the quorum. And so then why have an alternate if that's the case? And so that's where Steve and I had a conversation about that I don't think that language was intended that way. So anyway, for what it's worth.
Yeah, so I added that in there because we've never really had an alternate on any of our boards or commissions, and so we're a new territory for us. And so I was trying to figure out what role they play, and then as Suzanne accurately pointed out, there's some real advantages to having the alternate count towards the quorum because they can participate. The only thing an alternate can't do until they're a full member is vote.
Mhm.
So that's the reason I put it in there. And then Suzanne pointed out that there may be reasons to not put that in there, and I tend to agree with her.
I move that we add language to Article 4, Section D to add the alternate member or a alternate member to the quorum.
If that happens though, so let's say we have 2 members and an alternate, and then we take a vote.
She wouldn't act as a tiebreaker. I don't think we would be able to vote.
Okay, so we would not be able to vote. So that would need to be put, because otherwise, because we just said that if we have a quorum, but if an alternate, going back to the voting, if the alternate is considered part of the quorum and we had to take a vote, what would happen?
Well, so if there was only 3 people, so you got a quorum, a majority of the quorum counts towards an affirmative vote. So you would have to have both voting members vote in affirmative in that scenario.
And Brad, we could still operate and conduct a meeting if there wasn't any voting happening if we were short people.
Yeah, that's the real advantage, I got to tell you, because I sit on a Oregon Bar Association, and getting a quorum is often difficult, so we can't conduct business at all.
Gotcha.
That's the advantage with being able to get a quorum. And like Steve said, I don't think there's going to be a ton of voting going on with this particular group. But you could still conduct business.
So Brianna, revisiting your motion, I just want to clarify the language that you proposed. You're proposing that it be updated to allow Suzanne as the alternate to count towards the quorum.
Correct. It currently says it's to consist of at least 3 voting members. I'm suggesting that we add voting and alternate members of the commission.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on that motion? And do we have a second?
A second.
Okay, all in favor to update the language to take out voting on point D under Article 4, raise your hand.
Well, just a point of clarification.
Yeah.
I think we should say voting and alternative member, just so that would be the motion I would propose.
Okay, thank you. Important clarification, yes. Okay, so all in favor to add voting and alternate members to the language, raise your hand. Okay, and so 5 out of 5 approve, so we will update that language. Okay, other areas for discussion in the bylaws.
It would be helpful for me if you just made a motion to change the language from alternative to alternate wherever it is in the bylaws, and then I can get you a final fancy draft.
Okay, I'll make a motion to update alternative to alternate wherever it appears in the bylaws. Do we have a second for that motion?
I think it might have to it might need to come from someone who's not you. Cassie, if we're really following Robert's
Right.
rule.
Yeah, chair cannot make motions.
Okay, thank you. And it's Casey.
No,
I'm
Casey.
sorry.
It's
Sorry.
really fine.
I make the motion to replace alternative to alternate within the
And we
bylaw.
have a second.
I second.
Awesome. So all in favor of updating alternative to alternate in the bylaws, please raise your hand. Okay, and once again, we have 5 votes for alternate, so we will move forward with approving that. Okay, do we have any other discussion or any other motions? Any other discussion needed for us to get to a place of moving towards approval?
You might want to wait for Brad to be able to give you the clean version,
Okay.
just so that would be the next meeting.
Okay, so we can add that to an agenda item to start out next meeting, is to review that updated version. That's perfect. Okay. Moving on to the second item on our agenda, which is a comparative salary discussion. So Steve provided in this packet several other pieces of data from comparator counties from our discussion in our last meeting. So I want to open it up for discussion on that data.
And I might mention, I mostly did that so you had, so I think most of the other counties except for Multnomah did the comparator approach. Multnomah did an internal comparator to internal to other management jobs at the county. And so I wanted you to see kind of 2 flavors. There might be other flavors out there. I haven't looked at, for example, what they use in some of the salary commissions in the state of Washington for the counties. So if you want, I can do some research on those too, but that's one of the reasons I brought it up, to give you a couple alternatives that are being used here in Oregon.
I'll just jump in here and say that I think based on Oregon's pay equity law, I think it's going to be important to do an internal comparator. And I also like the external comparators as well, but doing the internal analysis, I like using both approaches to do the internal to see how the commissioner's salaries compare internally to skills, responsibilities, and so forth. And then also do the market comparators.
Okay.
I would also be interested in seeing for Washington, for the state of Washington, typically the issues that we have at Multnomah County is just due to the size. When you look at both Multnomah and Washington, we so dwarf all of the other counties are so dwarfed by us in what size and programs that are offered. So from a Multnomah approach, we've started looking at counties over in Washington, recognizing that there are some differences, but we get closer to population and also similar programs that are offered. So looking possibly up the I-5 corridor, King County, of course, as well as some of the other counties that are closer in those numbers.
Well, King's very big.
I was curious from maybe Laura or Susan, sorry, messing up everyone's names today. If you had any insight about the approach Multnomah County took, because I would say, in terms of Oregon, they would be the county that I would think we would be mostly comparable to. So I was wondering if there were any best practices or tips that just your proximity to that work that you learned of in this process.
Typically for us, we really do use Washington and Clackamas as our closest peer, just because they're closest in size as well as they're in the Portland location. So there's a lot of cross community interests. There's a lot of joint programs that we work together on. We also recognize that for the size and our management level, we dwarf everybody else because of that. So we do that internal comparison as well. Mm-hmm. Because for many of our job profiles, we do a market analysis, and we recognize that we can't do a really clear match for all the positions. So we've found that it's best to do that comparison of recognizing what duties are similar, what expectations are around the work. And we think we get kind of the best of both worlds of looking both in and outward. And then also with the pay equity, it becomes even more, I think, relevant for us.
Thanks.
I'll just add on, like, for our salary commission report that we received, there was a look externally and internally. And so I think if we can do the same and get the same sets of data, it's really helpful to see both, because you don't want to lag the market, but you also want to look internally. And many of our elected officials are above market, but that's because the commission wanted to follow compensation best practices of looking at compression between those department directors and the higher level executives right under those elected official positions. So if we can get both sets of data for us, I think it would be really great to look internally at Washington County too, at those high level executive positions and what those pay ranges and pay practices are.
And I don't know what Washington County's issues are around compression. Ours is pretty significant. I think typically with jurisdictions, you have a pretty significant number of your employees at the top of the range, because that is one of the things that working in public sector is so known for, is that people pretty much spend their entire career in the public sector side. So that's always an ongoing issue too for us, is the compression issue. So if Washington is similar to us, they likely also have some internal compression issues.
I could ask one of their folks to come and talk a little bit about their practices and also provide us with some of their salary scales for Washington County. And we could have them come at the next meeting if you'd want. So that's up to you. So, but I will also dig into more in Washington State. I pulled up kind of one of the closer ones. Actually, it's closer to Multnomah County. Snohomish is 830,000. Their council members get 123,000 compared to the county executive, which is of course going to be higher, but that was 183. So, but I can pull up a few of those. I
first came to the county about 9 years ago. We noticed a pretty significant difference between some of the counties to Multnomah County. That's shrinking a little bit, but we still do bring cost of labor down to the Portland area. And that's something that, you know, if Washington County doesn't have the tool, that we can run those numbers as well and look at.
And is there a way to do a total compensation, total reward, or other things in addition to the compensation? Are there other?
You can more in the state of Oregon, what happens when you start crossing state borders. It's more along the line of how they do their PERS program, if they participate in Social Security. And for Oregon, most all of the jurisdictions pick up the 6% employee portion of PERS. And that doesn't necessarily exist with other states, or it's required that the employees pay that portion, and it's not a consistent 6% across the various states. So when you look at total comp, which we do with some of our unions, it gets to be you can do it, you just have to be aware of what you're looking at. And typically, we've chosen not to look at the retirement part of it because of the fact that there's so many levels there. We look at it more around the benefit plan and if there's any additional compensation that gets tied to it.
Brad, I noticed you have your hand raised. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I do just want to share with you that Washington County is one of the few jurisdictions that does not pick up the PERS pickup.
No.
So that makes us rather unique across the state, actually. So that's a factor you'll want to consider.
Frugal from a long time.
Other items specifically related to the comparative salary at this point, we're kind of venturing into the next agenda item. So I just want to open that up because they're pretty closely connected at this point, which is a discussion of possible other comparators. We've already kind of talked about some of those. So just wanted to kind of specifically state that and see if there's additional discussion there.
So I'll grab some ones from Washington. I would have excluded King if you hadn't brought it up because it's almost 2 million in population.
Oh.
It's huge, so anyhow, but as long as you kind of recognize that. And I'd looked at some in California, but that you're starting to get a little far afield, and we've looked at, for example, when at the Salary Commission in Multnomah County, they one of the electeds brought up, I think it was sheriff or district attorney had brought up San Francisco, and San Francisco is a city and a county. And it's it's a whole different. It runs more like a city for the most part than a county. So it's a little different. So it doesn't make a very good comparator, but there's some other counties that if you want me to go venture south of the border, I can do that.
Laura. Oh, you're on mute, Laura.
If it's helpful to this group, would you guys be interested in me just listing off the jurisdictions that were the final ones reviewed at Multnomah counties in our report for the commissioners? I don't know if that's like a helpful point of comparison. In our final report, our commission had looked at Clackamas County, Lane County, Marion County, Pierce County, Snohomish County, and Thurston County. So for what it's worth, that's who we compared to in Oregon and Washington.
Yeah, very good to know. Suzanne.
You're on mute.
I know. I was my mouse. I'm so used to using an iPad, and when I use the iMac, I'm like, what am I doing? Not having lived in Oregon for very long, I was curious about, for the folks who were doing their comparators, did you look at other enterprise funds that these commissioners may be responsible for instance, I understand that Washington County has clean water. Multnomah County, does Multnomah County have a county administrator like Washington does? So, you know, this commission sets the county commission sets policy. It is the county administrator who runs things. And so I know that we always try to find comparators that are as close to apples. And in this case, I think it's going to be almost impossible, but I think it might be helpful if there were some materials related to what these county commissioners are responsible for. Mm-hmm. Do they have other either fiduciary or enterprise funds that they have to manage, so that you can at least see if you're applying a differential because of those duties, would that be helpful? The city of Colorado Springs in Colorado, the county, the city attorney has responsibility for a public utility. So I remember when I was doing my comparators, we always knew that we had to take part of that pay out because he was given additional money because of that. So I was just curious if there were things like that you all have done before. Thank you.
So I can speak to Multnomah County. They do not have a county administrator model. They have a COO, Chief Operations Officer, but it's so much less than a county administrator. The budget is determined by the chair. Some of the day-to-day stuff, yes, is managed by the COO, but the chair sets everything. So it's a what you'd call a very strong chair organization, whereas most of the rest of the counties in Oregon, if most of them use a county administrator model. So, and from what I've seen in some of Washington, I think that's similar up there.
So is there a way, because that was one of my biggest questions as far as the scope of responsibilities for the commissioners, and when we're looking at the comparators, how did they actually compare in scope so that we can evaluate the compensation? Is there some place that we can go, or is there some sort of table or something so that we know that we're comparing apples to apples? And I see you laughing, Steve, but
well, yeah, kind of more like apples to pears. but for the most part, the commissions are legislative bodies. They may take on additional duties as a liaison, for example, to one of the other operations. You know, one may go to the clean water. They for always attend that one. Or of course, they also meet as a board, because that's actually theirs. Sort of like in Multnomah County, the library district is its own district, but it's run by the county. And so the county board is also the library board. And so that model is not a universal model. In an accounting terms, they call it constituent units here. So how many constituent units does the organization report for? In Multnomah County, the library, a water district, and our water and sewer district, and a lighting district. So they have some of the similar things, but bigger in Washington County because they have more unincorporated area. And so it varies a little bit. So I kind of, in that one sheet about the various counties, I tried to talk about what other units are how many other units are they responsible for? And it's, so I think Washington County, from what I've seen, has got the most of any of the counties I looked at quickly. So. It's interesting, all the forms of local, there's a standard form of local government, and then when they go to a charter, it gets a little, once they leave the general law world, which is pretty formatted. The rest, goes out, and whatever the voters decide for them to do, that's what they do in essence. And over time, these things have grown, from small little things like in the water things, the extra sheriff's patrol, some of those things. You don't see extra patrol in a lot of counties because it's mostly unincorporated. So it's the balance. In Multnomah County, it's mostly incorporated in various cities. So it varies a little bit. It's the kind of, and like I think I mentioned once before, in some areas, some cities cross county boundaries. That doesn't happen in California at all. And so it does in Washington. So all this oddities of local government.
It sounds like, and I know we talked about this in our last meeting, that we would probably benefit from inviting some of the county commissioners to come and speak so we can ask them some more questions to fully understand how it differs compared to the comparators. I'm wondering if there are other criteria when we're thinking about comparators that anyone is curious about or interested in getting some more information about. Is everyone ready to move on to our next agenda item for today, which is discussing possible invited testimony? Okay, great. So we've talked about the county commissioners, and Steve also mentioned Washington County classification and compensation specialists to help talk about current state internal structures, those items. What other possible invited testimony?
Madam Chair, there's a list of people who provided an argument for the ballot, and they don't necessarily have a group title, but I would be interested in hearing from them. It looks like they serve in a variety of roles, from council chairs to board members in Washington County. So I would love to hear from some of those folks identified, and I have the list of names in front of me, but they are listed on the ballot on WC 43. And the names look like they were, or the statement was provided by Chair Harrington.
Well, I'll ask the chair's office if they could get some folks from that signed on to that. Because I know it wasn't just a commission-driven approach. It was community based on community input, and so we'll get some of those folks. We'll ask about getting at least a couple of current commissioners, Washington County commissioners. So we're probably talking about more than one meeting date here to squeeze everybody in, but that's good. You get good input, and I think the chair mentioned one recent departure from the commission who'd been around for about 20 years might be another good one to see that perspective. And I was told he would be happy to come too. So we'll start filling up the dance card, maybe figure about at least an hour's worth of testimony. What do you think? 15 minutes, 20 minutes per person, something like that?
Or a little less, maybe 10 minutes, just to. Okay,
10 minutes, but we'll leave some time on each side, so in case you get into a really good discussion. I mean, remember, some of these people, especially the elected ones, might want to talk a lot, like I sometimes do. So apologies.
Suzanne.
Thank you. I was also curious about what type of mechanism exists for public comments. I know that I think Brianna brings up a good point about the folks who signed on to what in Colorado we called the Blue Book, which was the comments for and against a measure. And there were no opposing comments to this commission. But I'm curious, I'm not even sure how many people are actually watching this Zoom meeting as a public meeting, but it would be interesting to see if there are any comments from the public regarding any thoughts that they have as taxpayers within this community.
So we have a mechanism for that we've posted on the Salary Commission page, and it's on every agenda that people can send comments to the Salary Commission email box, and I'll pass those on to you, all you folks. Haven't gotten any yet, but any I receive will be passed on to you, and then it will be up to you to invite them if you decide that their comments are worthy, worthy of pursuing more information, then you can invite them. Some broader, if you were advising on board policy or something like that, I'm sure there'd be more people wanting to comment during the meeting, but we figured the focus is so narrow, we'd make it by invitation. And I didn't want to start flooding you with people before you decided you wanted to hear from somebody. So that's where we are.
Brad?
So I can tell you that I spoke with a commissioner about a tangentially related subject to this yesterday, and the conversation went on for about 40 minutes, and that commissioner had a lot to say on kind of the roles and responsibilities of a commissioner. I found it pretty enlightening. But like Steve says, I think you might want to limit the amount of time because they'll want to talk about it all day long if they can. So.
And I think we can think about what specifically we're looking to ask when we're setting the agenda, whether it's, 10 to 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Suzanne.
What might save some time is if these commissioners could provide information to us previous to that as a, I don't want to say PowerPoint slides, whatever people use these days, but what was difficult, I looked on the website, I could not really find where these people maybe were liaisons to other local governments or jurisdictions. What do they do during, I know they have Tuesday and Thursday meetings. How often do they meet with the community? What are their roles as they work with other jurisdictions? What are their assignments? I think that would help understand a little more about what these county commissioners do, especially if they want to be considered full-time. So I just think that would be helpful if they could prepare a presentation.
I think I can ask I think we can get a list of those liaison roles of the, which members go to what meetings. They do talk about them in their work sessions for sure, because I've seen that. So we'll get a list of that. I'm a little hesitant to ask elected members of the commission to do a homework assignment, such as preparing anything for us. But if they had something already, I've been in both roles, and some people are very sensitive about being asked to put it in writing, and others are more than happy to write a book for you. So it's a kind of a touch and go sometimes.
Susan?
Steve, didn't you say in the last meeting that working with them, possibly coming up with a job description or a position description. I know that you mentioned a document currently, but if that's something along with like kind of an.
Actually, I think I sidestepped that because it's like, how often do you meet with the public as an elected official? And I see it in the legislative world. Some legislators will have town halls every 2 weeks, especially now that they're virtual. But others, it's like once a month or once every 3 months. And it varies by individual, because there's not a sort of a, okay, here are your job duties, here are your requirements. It's, well, you're here, you're elected, you've taken on this job, how much do you want to put into it in many ways? And it's, you know, I mean, yeah, there's certain, you're supposed to go to the board meetings. I mean, if you don't show up to a board meeting, you can be, asked to leave or removed. They can declare a vacancy, in other words. But it's very, I haven't seen a job description for most elected offices. It's a little, it's one of those, you take it on. I mean, there's certain legal requirements, but those are pretty low bars. Okay, you have to be at least 21. You have to have been registered to vote for at least 18 months or plus or minus in the district. Those kinds of things. And beyond that, there are not a lot of requirements. It's more of, what you put into the job and your willingness to take that on. Run for something.
Brad?
Yeah, so our board does each year at the beginning of the year kind of divvy out responsibilities for each board and commission that they're going to liaison with in the greater Portland metro area usually. And then there's some other alternatives. And I think they have to describe at the beginning of each year what other boards they sit on. And there's a document that I'm sure Kevin can provide to us.
Great.
That they do in January of each year. I could give you the charter, but I don't want to scare you with giving you the charter because it's just, there's a lot there, but not a lot that's really relevant to this particular, to like Steve says, there's not a lot of description of board members other than, qualifications, which are very minimal. And then there's a minor section about kind of the form of government, which Steve described really earlier. The difference between Multnomah and Washington County is we have a strong county administrator type of government here in Washington County, unlike Multnomah County.
That would be great if Kevin could help get us that list of focus areas. That would be great if that's something that exists out there.
Yeah, yes, Madam Chair, I am sending it to you all right now.
Thank you. Heike?
I'm just going to add, because I think it would be extremely helpful. I know, Steve, that you said, it depends really on the person, but I think if we can get a list of basic responsibilities that each board member is responsible for, and then if they go above and beyond and in other areas, that may support a discrepancy in pay or a difference in pay between two commissioners that could be evaluated as well.
We'll see what we can find. It's elected office is a little different, and different, of course, different for different kinds of elected offices. And each elected official tends to approach it their own way. I mean, you will have two different chairs at Washington County. You can look at one and look at the other, and they've approached it different ways, but their job, the overall job's the same. Even the same as with legislators. How much do you try to become a chair, or do you take on active leadership roles in the organization? Those kinds of things. It's loosely framed, and most elective offices are loosely framed, and then it's kind of by practice and by comparison to others that how you perform. But there's not the performance review at the end of the term is, do you run for re-election and get reelected? I mean, that's so, and the person who gets 82% of the vote gets the same salary as the person who got 51% of the vote. I mean, so one, you might say the performance level was higher with the other person, but they get equal pay. It's kind of an oddity of life. I can tell you all of you have lived a good, clean life. You haven't hung around with politicians much.
Does anyone have any other ideas or any discussion around possible invited testimony at this point?
So, Madam Chair, I know there was a note or something provided by Chair Harrington about one of the commissioners wanting part-time status or to continue that. I think it would be great to hear directly from him. I know we're requesting to hear from folks in general, but I would be interested if we can talk to him or hear from him directly about his situation.
I'll make the request, and I'm pretty sure that we'll be able to fulfill that one.
Awesome. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, great. So our last agenda item is other items or questions. One of the things that I'm hoping we can spend a little bit of time on is talking about the process and just getting a little bit more specific on what we think we'll need and what specific steps, and if there's sequencing of that in order to get to a place where we can make a great decision. So I'll open that up for discussion.
Well, I will say, I think we're on a good start here. I mean, obviously, you're going to hear from a lot of, from the county, for example. We're going to get, and then testimony from the public through the advocates for the ballot measure. And I think some of those steps as we go along will trigger other things. And in the background, I'll start pulling up some information from Washington State and seeing if I can clean up the Oregon stuff just a little bit more. I was impressed by some of the compensation board comparator charts. I thought they did a good job. I just didn't have time to pull that together. But I'll try to pull something similar together for this salary commission.
So I did have a question, because I know our work is limited to these sessions. So how do we, once we have the data, kind of get it into a format where we can have some discussion, or can that happen in preparation for the meeting, or just how does that piece work?
Well, certainly, like I said, I'll try to put together that comparator table, for example, and I'll do a preliminary shot at Washington State, so you can take a look at, just kind of like I did with Oregon, and you can kind of take a look at some of their reports up there. I have one little piece of from Snohomish, but that's, I kind of wanted to give you kind of a, like, okay, here's a quick overview of how it's been done. And, you just tell me what you need and I'll try to put it together. And then like we've did this time, you can kind of study that on your own and then bring back questions, I would say probably, and we'll, I'll go get more information.
And so at some point, as we get closer to some potential recommendations, it would be possible for people on this committee to kind of like be the ones who kind of take that home with them and individually work on that and then bring it back, send out in advance and then bring that back for discussion. Okay.
Well, whatever you want to do.
Okay.
The more you want to do, that's all right too. It does take some time, but to go through some of that. But I did it relatively quickly. And I wasn't as systematic as I should have been from the get-go. So I just wanted to get a quick overview. Okay, what's out there in the counties that are similar size to Washington County in Oregon. So
great, Brad.
So Steve's not going to like me saying this, but you don't have to feel compelled to only request information from Steve in these meetings. You can individually ask Steve, hey, can you get me some of this information? It would be valuable for me. And then you can share that at these meetings.
Great.
Yeah, as long as we can do those little sidebars, as long as you're not telling me, okay, well, this is the way we're going to do it. We're not making decisions in those. I'm informational. So I provide information and any assistance, and that's my role here. So other than to put in the part in the new bylaws that says facilitator gets an extra bonus at the end.
I think you're getting paid by the hour, buddy.
Okay, all right. And no PERS. Now I know they don't cover PERS either. So anyhow, I'm here for you, basically.
Yeah, I just didn't want you to think that you had to come to this meeting to ask Steve for some information. That's not required. You can go directly to him.
Awesome, thank you.
I think my question is, I think Steve's done a great job of pulling a lot of information for us, but I like to get in the data, and I'm assuming the group does, but to kind of compile it and maybe put it in a spreadsheet and be able to look at it in a different format might help us and move the meeting along once we're at that point. So that's kind of what I was getting at.
Certainly, I think you're welcome to tweak anything you want to do. Honestly, I do the same thing. When the COVID numbers were first coming out, there was nothing in there that gave us any idea of what things were. So I did my own spreadsheets. I had my own ratios of what was the number of people that were getting COVID per 100,000. I knocked it down to 10 because of some of our smaller counties, but so I was warning some of the people, some of the legislators I'd worked with. I'd say, hey, you've got a problem down in Marion County, for example. And who's still highest on the list? Marion County. So I do this. I'm a data geek. What can I say?
Brianna, sorry. Go ahead, Heike.
I want to ask Brianna's question a little bit differently. So is this the group that we have our working group with? So we cannot have working groups with, if Brianna and I want to create a spreadsheet together, we can't do that. This is going to be our working group, our time for our work, for the work to be done. Is that correct?
Brad, I think that kind of involves you. Can a couple commissioners work together on a data set, for example?
Well, so you can create subcommittees. And two of you can talk. What has happened over the last few years is you can't have what we call serial meetings, which is kind of if you think about the telephone game, you know, it's like you talk to this person, you talk to this person, and then you actually come to a conclusion on something. We had some big cases out of Lane County in the last 10 years on that. But two of you can communicate together on discussing these issues. You just can't come to any sort of decision. That's the advantage with actually, frankly, having 5 instead of 3 on any sort of commission. But you got to be super, super careful. So like, you know, Suzanne and Brianna can talk, but then if they bring Laura in, then you know, you've got a quorum, and then you've got a public meeting, and we can't go that route. But two of you can be talking to each other.
So if you want to pair up on some data sets, or what's the best way to look at this data, those kinds of things, without coming up and saying, oh, well, we have the magic formula here.
Mm-hmm. Susan, you look like you're thinking of something.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking about this. Can these be set up like in Google Documents as well, so that we have a master and then everybody can comment on, where we're at least having a track of comments, you know, calculation changes, so that not everybody has their own documentation, and then we try to have a meeting and everybody's reading off of a different worksheet.
Mm.
So that frankly makes me nervous, and that's what we as staff can do all the time, and we do it all the time. But you are a committee, and actually the difference between, you have a heightened committee, unlike, you're not advising the boards, so you're actually making decisions. And so these are decisions, you know, government decisions that you're making. So that gets really tricky if you did something like that. I think, you know, you could create a document, Suzanne, and then we could, and then you could bring it to this meeting and say, hey, what are your comments on this document? We run into that with our board a lot, because our board, they want to share those documents and then talk about, you know, all offline, and that's a problem for them. And so we're super careful with them. You guys actually sit in the same basic role, because you are actually making decisions, you're not making recommendations.
Suzanne.
So I have used Google Sheets a lot, and as pointed out, staff is different from a commission. I'm wondering though, if we could agree to a data set format, and then if people wanted to go individually and ask Clackamas or Lane County or whatever all these other counties are, then you all could have assignments, but you're gathering the same data. So I don't know if that's what we were trying to get to. And then you're able to merge that information into one document, and then the public will be able to see that Google Sheet or whatever it ends up being, or it's sent to Steve. I think that's why we have Steve as the person to do that work, so that we don't run afoul of the Open Meetings Act. And yet I know that everybody wants to just get in there and do some of this work, because it's what we do, right? So I don't know if that would make sense to agree on a data set for the comparator.
Essentially a format. If you're saying, right, okay, this is the kind of data we want, this is the format we want it in, and you know, each of you could grab a couple counties or whatever you wanted to do, however you wanted to do it. Yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, because all you're doing is standardizing the questions in essence. And you're not, what you can't do is standardize the answer.
Mm-hmm. Are folks interested in that approach? And if so, is someone interested in developing that template?
if it's okay to still kind of partner with someone in like a subcommittee concept, I'd love to partner with someone on that. So, yes.
I would be happy to join in on that.
Great.
Awesome.
And just to clarify, it's okay if Laura and I have like a one-on-one email discussing the template that we'll recommend to this group.
Yes, that is appropriate.
Okay, great.
Yeah, it's so when we were first talking about this before you were all appointed, I said, well, how's it going to go after you get? I said, these are professionals. They're going to run with it, you know, and that's what you guys are doing. You're saying, okay, we want this information, we want it in this way, and you're figuring out what that way is. You're going to do a proposed template and bring it back, and everybody agree to it, and then if you want to split up again and take on different jurisdictions or however you want to do it, you guys are the professionals. That's and I wasn't worried at all. But you know, the county hadn't dealt with professionals in this kind of situation before. So this is you're a lot of firsts here. So you're blazing the trail.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on or clarify, you know, maybe there's a group, so Brianna and myself, and then maybe there's another group because it seems like we do want to look at internal and external. So I don't know if that's split up or if we standardize that some way. It feels like we would be collecting different information internally and externally. So myself, I'm interested in the external format if it makes a difference, but happy to help with either or both.
I would be interested in maybe creating a template for the internal with a partner.
So I would
with that.
Yeah, and I think our internal HR staff can help you too. We're here to help.
So Susan and Heike will work on the internal template, and Laura and Brianna will work on the external template. And then from there, we can go about who's collecting what and kind of divide up that workload. Awesome. Does that sound, did I capture that? Okay.
I think the other thing we probably need to do is prepare a list of questions for either the commissioner or the people that we're interested in testimony for. So that was just the other item I wanted to make sure we called out before we wrapped up.
Steve, do you know how, will you know by the time we finalize our agenda, I'm guessing by next Friday, who will be attending, like who will be available to attend our next meeting?
The one person that talked to me about how they do their classification in essence and compensation stuff here had basically agreed to attend a meeting. She didn't, I said, well, I don't think we're ready for you at this one. I said, but maybe the next one. So I so kind of pre did that. So I think we've got one there. The question of anybody from the current boards, for example, Commissioner Rogers, whether his schedule would allow him to attend. He's the one that's been here the longest since the late 80s, and it'll just we just have to. We'll start asking on Monday, basically.
Okay. So I think as soon as we know who will be attending, we can work on assigning who from this committee will develop questions for the different people.
Well, yeah. So I think you've got your specific to the county internal operations, specific to electeds or former electeds, and then specific. Maybe it's different for the community members who supported the measure. So you can kind of think about that. And, if you want to shoot those kind of questions around, I don't think that's a problem, because you're not making any decisions other than this is what we'll ask. And you always leave a little an open-ended one at the end. And do you have anything else to add? Because that you can learn a lot in the last one sometimes. And then so I think it'll be fun.
Yeah. Okay, other process items that people want to discuss, or things that would be really helpful for you to see on, especially thinking about our next agenda at this point in order to kind of keep moving forward? Be doing a lot of information gathering.
I think for me, it would be helpful to make like a timeline, and we can have some milestones. I feel like we could probably take a really long time to do this work, or we could plan towards some milestones and achieve those if possible. So I think just some discussion around, like, once we get the information, those next steps and how we can plan that out on a calendar.
Okay, perfect.
I was going to mention that because I was talking with the county administrative office about this a couple days ago, and the sooner you could come to a decision, the better for budget purposes, because theoretically you could go up to June 30th, but for budget purposes, the sooner you get a decision done, the better.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned our optimistic end was the end of April, and that we got a little bit later start only by a week, actually. And we pulled off, miracle of miracles, we pulled off getting a full salary commission meeting in January. So that was our target, and we got it. And so thank you all.
I think if we're able to do a lot of this prep work we've talked about, start getting some of the folks invited for the testimony, and then discuss a timeline and get some milestones down, I think we'll be able to progress.
Yeah.
So, other items or questions that anyone would like to add or discuss?
I had one thing that I wanted to ask. So when I took a look at the website, I realized that Roy Rogers is still one of the commissioners. And a friend of mine is his stepdaughter. I've only seen him twice. We're not friends. We don't socialize. But I've been friends with this person for over 15 years, and I've seen him once or twice during that whole time. So I just wanted to raise that and see if there was any concerns.
No concerns from my half. I mean, that's attenuated enough that it's not an issue.
I'd agree, and I'm nastier on the conflicts than even the Oregon Governmental Ethics Commission. So no, I think you're fine. Thank you, but thanks for for considering that. So.
Yeah, it's much better to hear about that early on than late in the game, and then we have got a problem. Yeah. So I have one quick question. While you guys were discussing, I was working on getting you some final bylaws. On the revisions to the bylaws, where did you guys land? Was it 2/3, 3/5, 4/5, or any change at all? I didn't quite get that.
The motion I presented was a majority vote. So keeping the 3-person quorum and adding the alternate and then having a majority vote. I didn't say
Okay, so it's just
Third.
straight up majority. I can actually then take out the language about what the vote has to take place because it's any vote would be a majority vote. That will work.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I knew it was a little bit different than I was thinking. Appreciate it.
And we are scheduled until 5, so I'll just pause for just a second, just to make sure we don't have any other, and invite any other questions or items that anyone has. Don't want to rush us, but also don't want to linger if there isn't if there aren't any other items from anyone.
And feel free to send me any questions, issues, whatever. And obviously the chair, if you've got ideas for, who else you'd like to hear from, whatever. So.
Oh, I do want to clarify one thing. We want to finalize the agenda by the end of the day Thursday or end of the day Friday. What's ideal? And I think, Kevin, I don't know if that's
The
Okay.
end of the day next, well, preferably by noon next Thursday.
noon Thursday. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And I'll send you the template of what I've kind of drafted for you and Steve to direct me on what else you want added.
Awesome. Thanks. Okay, any other items or questions? Is there a motion to adjourn?
I don't think, Brad, correct me if I'm wrong, they don't need any motion to adjourn this meeting. They can just call it adjourned, correct?
Okay. Okay, well then let's adjourn this meeting.
Power of the chair.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Bye.
Great long weekend.
Bye.
Bye.